For the past 26 years, the Michener-Deacon Fellowship has been Canada's premier award to encourage excellence in investigative journalism that serves the public interest.
Well, part of the problem as a freelancer is you tend to take whatever contracts come across your desk because that's what you need to do to keep making a living and support your family. What the Michener-Deacon Fellowship allows you to do is really concentrate for a full, long period of time, whether it's months or a year, because we tend to stretch it out, on a subject that really engages you. And you can't do that otherwise. There's just no way. You have to both have the travel money and you have to have the time, because you don't get paid enough to support yourself if you're just writing the odd article or doing the odd project here and there. What this does is give you the sustained length of time, and that was really important for me to do with a subject that's this complex. The subject that I'm looking at, which concerns Aboriginal youth suicide, really requires that you go to communities, and they're often remote communities, to talk to people in person. It's really hard to get young people to open up to how they're feeling about committing suicide or having lost people to suicide unless you can sit down and talk with them. And once you do, you really get to hear from them about what they need. And we can't do that unless we go there. So without the fellowship, I would not have had the money to go and travel to Iqaluit, to travel to the Siksika First Nation, to go to remote places in northwestern Ontario and in northern BC to try and talk to the communities. Well, I'm still in the midst of processing a lot of what I've discovered, but my conclusions are that people need to really go into the communities, talk to people, and be willing to commit the resources. And that's going to be a joint project, really, that will require both federal and provincial support. But it has to be serious, and it has to really address the underlying causes, which include things like sexual and physical abuse at a young age, and it has to involve child welfare, as well as the communities themselves. Well, suicide prevention strategies are really key, and training on the ground, gatekeeper training like the ASSIST training program that was invented in Canada by a Canadian company, are really, I think, going to be crucial, as are crisis teams. And all of these things are something that have to be brought to, I guess, a wider audience in terms of public policy and politicians. Having this fellowship just really confirms in me that this is the kind of work that I want to do. I'm really happiest when I'm doing this kind of in-depth research and really have the ability to talk to a lot of people in a lot of different situations about one problem or one theme. So I guess it really confirms for me that if this funding was more widely available, or if I could do it again, I certainly would, that I really enjoy this kind of work and that it's very important.
I started in photojournalism about 20 years ago, and I confess that my main impetus was just curiosity. I really wanted to know for myself what were these things about that you see in the news, and what is conflict, what is war, what drives people into conflict, what is international aid, how does it work, does it work, what do we do? What do we do for people when disaster strikes? What are our responsibilities towards people in the developing countries? We're so rich, can be so poor. How does all this work? And so that same set of questions applies very much to the subject that I've proposed to the Michener-Deacon Fellowship. And I think those same questions will come up. And so to me, it's the same sort of drive from the beginning that had me in the Congo in the 1990s, and in 2005 I was in the Congo again and saw people mining for gold in artisanal gold miners and coltan miners in the Congo. And I've worked extensively with aid organizations, with the UN. So I feel that it's pretty much a pretty clean line straight through this whole original set of impulses to want to understand, especially this divide between wealth and poverty. In 2009, I was working on a story about gold prospectors, Brazilian gold prospectors in the Amazon. And I was deep in the jungle with these guys digging holes in the ground looking for gold, panning for gold like you would see in the Klondike 100 years ago. And I became aware that there was a Canadian mining company drilling for samples, and they were very close to closing a deal with the Brazilian government to start production in a big mine way out here in like the middle of the Amazon. And I then realized how far-reaching Canada's influence is in the mining world. And I read up later that 50% of the mining companies in the world are based in Canada. And therefore, because mining is such a big, messy, complex business, we are involved in a lot of conflictual relations with local populations around Latin America, some in Africa. And so I just felt that this is really will have a lot of impact on Canada's image abroad and what it is, what it is to be Canadian and traveling in other places. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue this subject. In any photograph, in my photography anyway, it is definitely people-driven. I suppose the primary actors in this play will be the local people that are generally protesting these mines. We're talking about farmers or small-time prospectors, people that don't have a lot of say, don't have a lot of power. Their governments decide to sell the land or whatever the rights to the foreign mining company, the Canadian company. These people are out of a job or have to change their lifestyle. So they're probably the emotional motor, if you will, and the emotional focal point. However, mining is a sort of a vast enterprise, and I'm also looking at possibly doing some aerial photography and kind of large-scale landscape photography to bring home the environmental impact of this kind of mining. If you look at a map of Latin America and the places where there are conflictual relations between Canadian mining companies and local populations, you'll see a red line going all the way down, or red dots going all the way down the whole continent. There's maybe 50 mines where there's problems between the mining companies and the local population. So it's a huge subject. Canadian mining companies are in Africa, they're in Asia. With mining, there's almost always going to be some kind of conflict because it's such a big, messy business, and somebody's got to be moved and so on. So the only way you could do something this size in today's market or climate with media is to have support from outside, and the Michener is the only one in Canada that I know of that is offering this kind of support for a project this big.